Phase 2 of Wu's anniversary banner is stuck with some of the most broken DPS characters in the game, as well as two of my favorite hybrid characters including Brant and Changli, due to how addictive their playstyle can be. In today's video, I'll be providing a detailed review of all these characters and their signature weapons to give you a better understanding of the value that they can provide to your account. And if you already have all these characters, but you're not really sure which of their sequences can be good for them to stay relevant in the meta for a very long time, no worries, because I've got you covered. I've already covered phase 1, which I'll leave in the video description, and in case you're new here, the name is Senpai and I make videos that helps you improve in every aspect of Wuthering Waves, so be sure to leave a like and subscribe if this video provides value to you in any way. With that said, let's get right into the pull value analysis.
On this festive day, I will stand no disruptions.
Jinhsi is by far one of the strongest DPS characters that we have in the game, with the ability to demolish bosses much faster than any other DPS character due to her low field time requirement, and the fact that she has remained that way ever since her release in version 1.1 during the Thors of Aeons update is actually quite impressive. If you go into her forte description, you see that the damage scaling of her Luminous Epiphany, Stellar Glamour, is just 348%, which is nothing impressive, but this additional multiplier per incandescent stack that you see right here is what makes her hit those crazy numbers even at S0, due to the fact that she can have a total of 50 incandescent stacks, and the damage also scales off resonance skill damage, further increasing the damage that she can output if you have resonance skill damage amplification effects from sub DPS buffers like Chixia and Cantarella. Jinhsi is among the characters in the game that has a very simple playstyle, which is perfectly suited for casuals. All you need to do is, whenever you intro with her, just use your skill, spam basic attacks, and use a Luminous Epiphany, which is the same as the Forte skill, when it becomes available. You can basically rinse and repeat that playstyle at that point, so anyone can pick up and use Jinhsi with minimal effort requirement. But with that said, she can be quite boring for players that want a more engaging playstyle, so be sure to keep that in mind if you're planning to pick her up in phase 2. But for those who want to use Jinhsi to her maximum potential, I've got you covered. There are a few things that you can do concerning her skill that puts her in the incarnation state to decrease her field time even further. The first one is to dash right after the skill cast after an intro skill, which will allow you to skip the long animation. The second one is a bit harder to implement because it involves jump cancelling in a very small window, but it's much faster than dash cancelling. So basically what you need to do is to press jump while Jinhsi is entering her incarnation state, which is visible by the yellow aura that you see around her. But keep in mind that this cannot be done after she enters the incarnation state when she is spinning on the flying swords, so the window is quite short. If you can't manage this, just use dash cancels, which is pretty easy to execute. Her ability to stay airborne after an intro skill while she's in the incarnation state helps Jinhsi avoid many attacks from enemies that are telegraphed to hit the ground, reducing the chances of getting knockbacks. You can even abuse this ability much further by using your grapple to gain even higher elevation, making it difficult for enemies to reach you. But even with all the insane damage that Jinhsi can output, she has not even reached her full potential, because if a sub DPS buffer that provides coordinated attacks and amplifies spectral damage and resonance skill damage gets added into the game, her damage will gain a significant upgrade. So in case you want to pick her up in phase 2 but you're a bit worried that she has reached her peak as a damage dealer since she has been in the game for quite some time, I hope this gives you some assurance to pull for her without any worries. One of her disadvantages is that her kit is not designed to deal consistent damage over time in a large area of effect like Changli, Yao, and Jian, so she'll struggle in endgame content like Whimpering Waste if she's the only DPS character that you are using. But this issue can be solved by pairing her with another DPS character or hybrid character to form a double DPS composition. Also keep in mind that while her short field time requirement can contribute to a high DPS, it can be a double-edged sword, because generally the more field time DPS characters spend doing damage, the more resonance energy that they can regenerate for the entire team. So Jinhsi can prolong the time that you spend on your rotations if your rotations are not well optimized for your other characters to get more resonance energy. I'll leave a link in the description to my guide videos on how you can avoid this, especially if you're using Jinhsi with Cantarella, since her resonance energy regeneration with her Forte circuit is not as decent compared to Chixia. In terms of team options, she's quite free-to-play friendly since Yuanwu is available for free to provide coordinated attacks, and he can be put on Rejuvenating Glow build with the Originite Type 4 Gauntlet to proc the attack buff on Rejuvenating Glow for the entire team. Tao Chi is also easily available, who can be used to provide resonance skill damage amplification. I actually made a video some time ago on this free-to-play team composition, so if you're interested, I'll leave a link in the video description so that you guys can check it out after this video. In case you're worried that Jinhsi's team options can be quite expensive. For a signature weapon, it can be a very versatile option for many DPS characters, mainly due to the high base attack and the crit rate substat, which is 2.3% more than what a crit rate focused echo main stat provides. The first part of the passive also provides 12% attribute damage bonus, which is much better than attack percentage due to how easy it is to get attack percentage on your echo substat. So if you want a broad blade that you can basically slap on any DPS character, feel free to pull for it. However, if you have Jian's signature weapon and you want to save pulls as much as possible, you can use the Verdant Summit instead. The crit damage substat will not be an issue due to the extra crit rate that Jinhsi has on her skill tree. For her sequences, S2 might seem tempting to get, but if you think about it deeply, it's not really that big of a quality of life change or a big upgrade, since you will still need resonance skill damage amplification buffs from Jeji and Cantarella, who still provides coordinated attacks, so it's not really necessary for you to spend money on S2 if you already have Jeji and Cantarella to pair Jinhsi with. Target S1 instead if you're planning to pull for sequences, since it adds a whopping 80% additional damage scaling to her Illuminous Epiphany Forte skill.
Is this your invitation to dance, gentlemen? No need to rush. The ball has only just begun.
Carlotta is part of the 3 characters in the game that sit on top of the meta in terms of damage output in Wuthering Waves. One of her best strengths is her ability to deal damage over a long range, which can be very good when facing enemies that have high mobility like Impermanence Heron, Tempest Mephis or Thundering Mephis. I'm sure all of us have had this experience at some point, where fast-moving targets can easily move out of Showkeeper's Liberation Circle, and it's very annoying when you have to chase them down outside the circle, losing the crit rate and the crit damage buffs in the process. But with Carlotta, you can comfortably stay in the circle and simply spam your basic attacks to do damage to the enemy. She's also very easy to play with, so casuals can pick her up and use her without any difficulty. However, if you want to increase your damage per second, you can take advantage of animation cancels, which can be helpful in hypercarry teams as well. You can simply swap out to another character after using Carlotta's Chromatic Splendor skill or her second skill cast, so that the active character on the field can proceed with your rotations. But keep in mind that you need to swap out before Carlotta lifts off from the field. Doing it after she takes off will let the active character appear in midair, which can be quite uncomfortable since that particular character will be vulnerable. Being able to take advantage of animation cancelling also extends her team options, so she can be played in Quickswap teams with other DPS or hybrid characters like Zhangli Yao and Changli, making her one of the less boring characters in the game because there's a lot of experimentation that you can do with her playstyle as far as team building is concerned. When she goes in her Twilight Tango state or her Liberation state, which can be activated by her Liberation, you can easily lose damage if the enemy is highly aggressive. The Death Knell animations can easily be cancelled by dodging if you need to evade damage, as you guys can see right here. So you can simply use her first skill in the middle of her Death Knell attacks to freeze the enemy for a few seconds so that you can get all your damage in very easily. I have a detailed rotation guide explaining this tech, so you can check out that video, which I'll leave in the description. One of her disadvantages is her low area of effect for doing damage, so she can struggle in endgame content like Whimpering Waste. This issue can be solved by playing her with other hybrid characters or other DPS characters for more AoE damage, or you can even pair her with sub-DPS buffers that can amplify her own damage like Cantarella, who also specializes in controlling multi-target enemies and can prevent them from splitting up very easily due to the constant freeze effect that it can inflict on enemies. Tao Chi can also be an excellent alternative for a sub-DPS buffer since her outro amplifies resonance skill damage in case you don't have decent buffers that can provide buffing capabilities like Jeji and Cantarella for Carlotta. I don't have a rotation guide for Tao Chi and Carlotta, but do let me know down in the comments if you need one and I'll make one as soon as possible. Carlotta's weapon options are also pretty decent because the static mist is available on the standard banner, which is guaranteed at 80 pulls. Although the passive is quite useless on Carlotta, the high base attack and the crit rate substat is really nice to have for damage dealers in general. Carlotta's signature weapon is also not a must pull if you're interested in something that can be used on many pistol DPS characters. The main issue is from the crit damage substat. While it's quite huge, you'll run into low overall crit rate if the character using that weapon has crit damage on their skill tree. So even if you roll double crit on all your echoes, you still end up with about 60% total crit rate, making that character heavily dependent on Showkeeper. That's why weapons with crit rate substats are really good to have on your account. For sequences, target S1 as a quality of life change since it provides 12% additional crit rate to any damage that you inflict on enemies, while the enemy has the deconstruction debuff, which shreds enemy defense by 18%. Unlocking this particular inherent skill on Carlotta also makes sure that Carlotta can constantly refresh the duration of deconstruction, so basically all her main damage sources will benefit from the additional crit rate increase from her S1.
Third, crush your enemies all at once. Show no mercy.
Changli is a hybrid character, which means she can fulfill both a sub-DPS buffer and a main damage dealer in your team building. She was often misunderstood by a lot of players in the WoW community for being clunky or outputting below average damage required for endgame content, but all these misconceptions come from the fact that most players don't really know how to use her effectively, and if I'm being honest, it's basically a skill issue. However, this doesn't mean that you need to be a sweaty player to be able to play Changli. Players that are well versed in quickswapping can bring out her maximum potential, but casuals can also use her to clear any type of content. Let me explain. Changli takes a lot of field time if you want to play her as a generic sub DPS character or even a hyper carry due to how long it takes for you to get true sight charge and true sight conquest. So what this means is that as a sub DPS buffer, she'll take quite a long time to fully fill her concerto energy. That's why it's much more efficient to build her forte stacks by taking advantage of long animations provided by another DPS character like Changli or even Carlotta while they are doing damage so that they don't encounter any major DPS losses, and that basically sums up what Changli Quickswap is all about. This also allows other DPS characters like Changli to benefit from her 25% liberation damage amplification, so you can play her in a Quickswap team composition, while Changli can have her outro buff to nuke enemies with his liberation, before you start Quickswapping again in the subsequent rotations. So Quickswapping doesn't necessarily mean that outro buffs from sub DPS buffers becomes entirely useless. I'll leave a link to her dedicated video for you guys to check out if you're interested in much simpler methods of quick swapping, but if you're not comfortable with pressing many buttons, I still got you covered. This method is strictly for casuals who prefer to play Changli as a hyper carry or as a generic sub DPS buffer. While it's not highly optimal to play her the way that I'm about to show you, it'll still get the job done. All you need to do at the start of the rotation is to use her skill to proc the Molten Rift buff and build concerto on other characters for a Changli intro skill. After the intro, don't press your basic attack button, but use her liberation instead. Keep holding your basic attack button when the liberation animation begins, so that she goes straight into her forte heavy attack. You can press her basic attack button to get one stack. Now use her skill, jump, plunge, and do basic attacks to get one stack again. Now you can use another skill cast and basic attack to get the final stack to perform another forte heavy attack. This is the best way to play Changli for casuals, so you can still pick her up in phase 2 if you're worried that she's only for sweaty WoW players. It's also worth mentioning that her area of effect for doing damage is actually insane, so she's a good fit for endgame contents like Whimpering Waste. For her sequences, they offer little damage buffs for Changli, but for low spenders, target S2 if you have her weapon. The 25% crit rate makes it possible to run a crit damage 4-cost echo. If you look at my build here, I'm running a crit damage 4-cost echo. I don't have a signature weapon, so I won't add the crit rate that we get from Emerald of Genesis to a small crit rate calculation that we're about to do. As you can see here, I have 41% crit rate on my echoes alone, so if we add the extra 8% crit rates that we get from her skill tree, we end up with 49% crit rate. Now every character gets 5% crit rate by default, so if we add that, we get 54% total crit rate. Now, if we add the 25% that we get from her S2, we end up with 79% crit rate in total, which is insane. So prioritize S2 if you have a weapon, which will allow you to build more crit damage for her to deal more damage overall. If you're in a position to spend a little bit more and you love to play her with other DPS characters, S4 should be your stopping point, which provides an attack boost for anyone in the team. For her weapon, it has a bit of value in terms of versatility, since we have a lot of sword characters that can benefit from it, including Camellia, Spectre Rover, and Havoc Rover.
Then what are we waiting for? We're not missing this show for the world.
This man was doom posted on several occasions before the release of version 2.1, and he absolutely crushed all those allegations with his release on the character roster. Brant quite literally does everything in the game. He does surprisingly decent damage as a hybrid character, even on free-to-play builds. He heals your entire team, provides shields for your entire team as well, and provides buffing capabilities with his outro skill, making him one of the best double DPS candidates you can pull for in the game. He can self-sustain himself as a solo carry because his kit is designed in such a way that he does not heavily depend on stuff like intro skills to fill his forte stacks, since his liberation buffs the amount that he can recover in a very short amount of time. Since his attacks are mostly executed in midair, he can easily avoid damage that are telegraphed to hit the ground. His team-wide sustain capabilities increases the chances of survival in difficult endgame modes like holograms, where enemies can easily one-shot your characters. However, his playstyle requires you to be a bit proficient at dodging in midair to use him more effectively. He can also struggle quite a bit in multi-wave content like Whimpering Waste, since his forte skill damage is more of a nuke type damage and not consistent over time, but this can be solved by pairing him with another DPS character or hybrid like Changli, who benefits from all the outro skill buffing capabilities that he can provide. His only issue is how easily he can burn resources to get energy regen and double crit substats on your echoes, but it only becomes a major problem if you're a type of player that builds multiple characters at once. For his team options, he has access to Sanhua for hyper carry due to Sanhua's incredibly fast concerto and resonance energy regeneration. He can also use his forte circuits twice in one rotation without losing buffs from healing buffers like Shorekeeper and Verena. He can also be slotted in many double DPS team comps where the other DPS character can benefit from his outro buffs like Carlotta, Changli, or even Jinhsi if you're not comfortable with their free-to-play team compositions. But do keep in mind that due to the moderate field time that he needs to use his forte skill, double DPS team comps are much better if you have a decent investment like having his weapon, for example, so that his personal damage can make up for the moderate time that he spends on the field. I'll leave links to his detailed guide and his team synergy with Carlotta and Jinhsi in the video description, so be sure to check it out after this video if you're interested. For his signature weapon, it's not a must in terms of versatility, since he's the only character that can use it at the time of making this video, but he has access to Overture, which is as close as a free-to-play option that you can get, and you don't need high refinement since the passive is useless on him. For his sequences, target S1 if you mostly play him as a hyper carry, since it provides a decent quality of life change by slowing down enemies when he uses his forte skill, giving you the chance to get your damage in without being interrupted, and it grants a nice overall damage scaling boost as well to all types of his attacks. But keep in mind that S1 is not really necessary if you mostly play Brant in a Quickswap team composition.
Everything the light touches will be yours.
Roccia is also a sub-DPS buffer that was released ahead of her best time because she was released before Whimpering Waste became an official endgame mode, which involves multi-target enemies, where crowd control is one of the best utilities that can help you clear it without going crazy. But even with her crowd control capabilities, it is not really recommended to get her as a low spender or free-to-play if you already have Cantarella on your account, since she provides not quite the same utility as crowd control, but similar utility with Hazy Dream that can prevent multiple targets from splitting up easily. Also keep in mind that 3-cost enemy types also exist in Whimpering Waste, like Cyan Herons for example, who makes crowd control quite useless, but they can still be frozen with Hazy Dream from Cantarella, further reducing Roccia's pull value. Roccia's outro buffing capabilities are also in direct competition with Sanhua, who also provides basic attack damage amplification, and the best part is that she's an easily accessible character in the game. The presence of Danjin also reduces Roccia's pull value even more, since Danjin is a readily available character that can provide havoc damage amplification to havoc DPS characters like Havoc Rover and Camellia. So things are not really looking great for Roccia in terms of pull value. While she provides the best buffing capabilities that has a perfect synergy with two of the best Havoc DPS characters in the game currently, she's outshined by the presence of easily accessible characters and Cantarella's ability to provide similar buffing capabilities and put restrictions on enemy movement, which in most cases are much better than Roccia's crowd control utility, since some multi-target enemies are not affected by Roccia's crowd control capabilities. At the current state of the game, Hypercarry Brant is the only team composition competing with Camellia over Sanhua as a sub-DPS buffer. But if you have a lot of characters in the game, you can simply form another team composition and dedicate Sanhua to Camellia or Brant based on which team comp that you prefer. So my only recommendation is to get Roccia if you don't have Cantarella on your account or you're not comfortable with using Donjin for Havoc Rover due to her HP drain mechanic. Roccia's weapon on the other hand is quite a versatile choice due to the high base attack that it provides and the crit rate substat, so if you don't have Changli Yao's signature weapon already, it can be a good substitute that you can basically slap on all Gauntlet main DPS characters. For sequences it's not a must, but target S2 as a low spender if you want her to have more value than S6 Sanhua, S6 Donjin or even Cantarella for Havoc damage dealers, since it provides 40% Havoc damage bonus to all resonators in the team. You cannot obtain this type of buffing capability in any of Cantarella's sequences since they mostly increase her own personal damage and she gets much better at controlling multi-target enemies due to the additional ways that she gets to activate Hazy Dream. That pretty much sums up my pull value analysis for phase 2 of the anniversary banners. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content or if it provided any value to you. If YouTube got it right, you should like this video that pops up on your screen, so be sure to give it a watch and join our Discord community if you're having any issues with the game or you just want a place to chill or hang out. Link will be in the channel description. Catch you guys in the next one. Bye bye.